In the opulent halls of the Hayes estate, where gold-trimmed mirrors reflected hollow smiles, Elena Hayes lived a life scripted by obligation rather than passion. She had married Richard Hayes at his dying mother's insistence, a union forged in pity rather than fire. Richard, heir to a fortune built on steel and secrets, treated her with the detachment of a businessman reviewing ledgers. Their bed was a vast expanse of silk, divided by an invisible chasm. Elena often lay awake, listening to the silence that spoke volumes about their fractured bond. The estate seemed to mock her, its marble floors echoing her footsteps like accusations, its crystal chandeliers casting shadows that danced mockingly on the walls. Elena had come from a modest background, where family dinners were filled with laughter and warmth, not the sterile formality of the Hayes household. She remembered her parents' small home, bustling with siblings and shared stories, starkly contrasting this gilded prison. Richard had chosen her because his mother, Evelyn, had seen a quiet grace that might soften his son's hardened edges in Elena. Evelyn, battling a terminal illness, had pleaded with Richard to settle down before she passed. He obliged, viewing the marriage as a dutiful checkbox rather than a heartfelt commitment. From the wedding day, Elena sensed the void. The ceremony was grand, attended by society's elite, but Richard's kiss at the altar was perfunctory, like sealing a contract. In their lavish suite, he turned away from her that night, murmuring about exhaustion from the day's events. Elena had hoped time would bridge the gap, but months turned into years of emotional isolation. Richard buried himself in work, expanding the family empire ruthlessly, while Elena wandered the empty rooms, her presence fading like a forgotten painting. The whispers started subtly, first among the staff. The cook mentioned it to the maid, who confided in the gardener. Poor Mrs. Hayes, they said, could not give the master an heir. Such a shame for a man of his stature. Elena overheard them one afternoon in the servants' quarters, the word infertile slicing through her like a blade. She froze, her heart pounding, wondering if they were right. That evening, she approached Richard in his study, surrounded by leather-bound tomes and flickering screens. "Richard, we should see a doctor about the children together." He looked up from his papers, his eyes cold as winter stone. "Why? You can consult whoever you need. The issue isn't with me. But it could be anything. Stress or... The problem is yours, Elena. My lineage is impeccable. Please do not drag me into your failures." His words stung, embedding doubt deep within her. Elena retreated to the bathroom, pressing her hands against her flat belly, whispering apologies to the children who never came. She had always dreamed of motherhood, tiny hands clutching hers, laughter filling a home. But here, in this mansion of echoes, those dreams withered. As Evelyn's health declined, she visited weekly, her frail form a reminder of time's fragility. Her eyes would drift to Elena's stomach, filled with unspoken questions. "Nothing yet?" "No, mum, not yet." "Then it's time for tests. There might be something amiss." Elena nodded, but inside, fear coiled like a serpent. Evelyn, sensing the tension, pulled her aside one day. "Richard has always been guarded, dear. His father was the same, cold and ambitious. I hoped you'd melt that ice." "I try," Elena whispered, "but he keeps his distance." Evelyn patted her hand. "Give it time. Love can bloom in unexpected places." But time only amplified the rift. Richard began avoiding their shared bed, retreating to guest rooms under the guise of late nights. Elena, desperate, researched fertility alone, reading articles about stress-induced issues and environmental factors. She wondered if the constant pressure and lack of affection poisoned her body. One night, she found him in the library with a glass of scotch. "Richard, please, let's get tested together. It could be us, not just me." He slammed his glass down. "How dare you imply I'm flawed? The Hayes bloodline has produced leaders for generations. You're the outsider here." Tears welled in her eyes. "I'm your wife. This is in your name only since you can't fulfill your role." The cruelty escalated after Evelyn's death. The funeral was somber, with Richard standing rigid beside Elena, not once offering comfort. With his mother gone, the last buffer vanished. The staff, emboldened, no longer hushed their gossip. Elena heard Barren, which was attached to her name like a curse. Richard echoed it, his frustration boiling over during dinners alone. "How long must I wait for an heir? You were supposed to give me that. I've tried everything. Maybe if we tried? That's not enough. You've wasted my time." Elena felt her spirit crack, but a spark of defiance flickered. "The soil here may be too poisoned for anything to grow." He laughed bitterly. Excuses, always excuses. That night, Elena slept on the floor of a guest room, too heartbroken for the empty bed. She pressed her hand to her belly, murmuring, "If only love had been here, you might have come." The nursery Evelyn had decorated remained locked, a symbol of unfulfilled promises. It haunted Elena, painted in soft pastels with a carved crib and butterfly curtains. One evening, she stood outside it, hand on the knob. Richard found her there. "What are you doing?" "That room is for my children. Real ones." The words shattered her. She whispered prayers in the dark, dreaming of escape. Outside, storm clouds gathered, mirroring the turmoil within. Elena didn't know that deliverance was near, and that breaking it completely could lead to remaking. The confrontation came on a stormy evening. Richard entered the conservatory with a manila envelope. "Elena, we need to talk." "What is that?" "Divorce papers. Sign them." "You're defective, Elena. I need a woman who can give me what I deserve." Tears streamed down her face. "Where will I go?" "Not my concern. Tonight. Now." "In the rain?" "That isn't kind. That's justice for the years you stole." Her hands shook as she signed, the ink blurring with her tears. He allowed one suitcase, nothing more. As she stepped into the downpour, wind whipping her face, Elena glanced back at the blazing lights of the estate. "I hope your next wife gives you everything, and that your children see who you truly are." She walked into the darkness, her suitcase heavy and shoes ruined, but her resolve hardened with each step. The road ahead was uncertain, but she felt a glimmer of freedom for the first time. Lightning illuminated the path, and Elena pressed on, unaware that fate was about to intervene with a rescuer's headlights cutting through the night. The grandeur of the Hayes estate concealed a poisonous atmosphere that seeped into every corner like invisible fog. Elena moved through its vast rooms like a shadow, her presence tolerated but never cherished. Richards's mother, Evelyn, had been the estate's fading light, and her weekly visits were a mix of scrutiny and fragile hope. Confined to her wheelchair, Evelyn would sip tea in the sunroom, her gaze drifting inevitably to Elena's midsection, laden with unspoken expectations. "Still nothing, dear?" Elena would shake her head, forcing a smile. "Not yet, ma'am." Evelyn's eyes, sharp despite her illness, would soften momentarily. "You must see a specialist. There could be an issue preventing conception." The suggestion hung heavy, implying fault where none had been proven. Elena excused politely, retreating to a distant powder room to let tears fall in private. She pressed palms against her abdomen, wondering if her body betrayed her or if the estate's chill stifled life itself. Evelyn had always been kind in her way, but her loyalty lay with the Hayes legacy, a bloodline of industrial titans unbroken for generations. She had orchestrated the marriage, believing Elena's gentle nature might temper Richard's ambition. But now, with death approaching, her concern for an heir grew desperate. Evelyn passed quietly one dawn, her final breath echoing through the mansion like a closing door. The funeral was a spectacle of black attire and murmured condolences, attended by business associates and distant relatives. Richard stood stoic beside Elena, his arm brushing hers without warmth, a physical proximity that masked emotional distance. As the casket lowered, Elena wept for the woman who had been her reluctant ally, the only one who occasionally defended her against the growing tide of judgment. With Evelyn gone, the estate's toxicity intensified, unfiltered and unrelenting. The staff, once discreet, now gossips without restraint. Elena caught fragments in the kitchen corridors. "Poor Master Richard, tied to a wife who can't bear fruit. My sister faced the same. She turned out to be sterile. What a waste for such a fine man." The words sterile and barren became synonymous with her name, whispered in halls she once called home. Elena froze one afternoon, overhearing the housekeeper confide to the driver, "She's defective, and that's what. No wonder the nursery stays locked." Defective. The term lodged in her mind, eroding her confidence like acid. She had no defense, no proof to counter the claims. That evening, she mustered the courage to address Richard over dinner, the long mahogany table stretching between them like a battlefield. "We need to talk about seeing doctors." Together. He sliced into his steak without looking up. "Why together? You handle your concerns. Because marriage is a partnership, it could affect both of us." His fork paused, eyes narrowing. "Are you suggesting I'm at fault? The Hayes men have sired heirs for centuries, flawless stock. I'm not accusing anyone, I'm just exploring options." He set down his utensils with deliberate calm. "The problem isn't mine, Elena. Accept that and fix it." The dismissal crushed her. She pushed food around her plate. Her appetite vanished, while Richard resumed eating as if nothing had occurred. Societal pressures weighed heavily on him, though he never admitted it. In his world of boardrooms and mergers, an heir symbolized continuity, power unchallenged. Friends at galas inquired about children, their questions laced with pity, fueling his resentment. He began echoing the staff's cruelty, his comments sharpening like knives. As rain pattered against windows one night, he turned to her in the dim bedroom light. "How long do you expect me to endure this? No children, no legacy. It's not fair to blame me alone." "Fair? I gave you wealth, status, this life. What have you provided in return?" "Love, support. I've tried to build a home." "Trying isn't conceiving. You've failed your purpose." Purpose. The word reduced her to an object, a vessel expected to produce. Elena felt a fracture in her chest, a deepening crack. "If you showed affection, things might change." "Affection?" he scoffed. "That's not the issue. Admit you're the problem." She couldn't. Instead, she withdrew further, sleeping in guest quarters to escape the emptiness of their shared space. Mornings brought no relief. Richard departed early, leaving notes about meetings, never endearments. Elena researched fertility clinics discreetly, but fear paralyzed her. What if tests confirmed the whispers? What if she were broken? Unbeknownst to both, Evelyn had orchestrated a secret test years prior. During Richard's routine physical, she requested a fertility analysis, terrified of any flaw in her son. Results arrived sealed: low sperm count, poor motility, unlikely natural conception. Evelyn buried them in her safe, confiding only in a trusted cousin. The family name must remain untarnished, she insisted. Better to let Elena bear the blame than expose Richard's vulnerability. The cousin, bound by loyalty, stayed silent, allowing the deception to fester. The accusations peaked during a colleagues' gathering that Richard hosted. Laughter filled the drawing room, but Richard's face darkened when the talk turned to families. Later, alone with Elena, he unleashed pent-up fury. They asked about heirs again. "Do you know the humiliation? Being the only one without children because of a deficient wife." Deficient? That isn't kind. Truth hurts. Admit it, Elena. You're sterile. Broken. The label spoken aloud by him shattered her resolve. She stared, tears blurring his form. "You talk as if I chose this." Perhaps you did, subconsciously. To spite me. The absurdity stunned her into silence. This man who touched her rarely and never tenderly, accused her of deliberate sabotage. "You're mad." His hand gripped her arm, bruising. "Watch your tone. I own this life you live." He released her, storming off. Elena rubbed the mark, her spirit bruised deeper. That night, curled on a guest room carpet, she whispered to her empty womb, "Maybe in a place of warmth, you'd thrive." The chapter builds to an emotional crescendo when Richard, influenced by a lawyer's casual mention of divorce options, begins plotting. Elena sensed the shift, his glances colder, conversations curt. Isolation deepened. Even Clara, a distant acquaintance from her pre-marriage days, couldn't visit due to Richard's restrictions. Elena journaled her doubts, pages filled with questions. Am I truly barren, or is this house the curse? As whispers evolved into open scorn, Elena's resilience waned. She avoided mirrors, seeing only failure reflected. Yet a quiet voice urged endurance, hinting that truth would emerge. Little did she know that the literal and figurative storms were brewing, ready to sweep her toward revelation and renewal. The estate's toxic soil had poisoned her bloom, but roots of strength lingered, waiting for fertile ground. The rain fell in torrents, erasing the world beyond the Hayes estate's iron gates. Elena staggered down the winding driveway, clutching a small suitcase, her only tether to the life she had known. Richard's final words echoed in her mind, sharp as the wind that lashed her face. "Sign the papers, Elena. You're defective. Leave tonight." Her thin coat offered little protection against the storm's fury, and her shoes, already soaked, slipped on the slick pavement. The suitcase grew heavier with each step, waterlogged and dragging at her arm, but she refused to abandon it. It held remnants of her past self, a locket from her mother, a worn journal, a few modest dresses that predated her marriage. These were her anchors, proof she existed before Richard's cold empire. The estate sat miles from town, isolated by design to flaunt its grandeur. Elena hadn't considered the distance when she signed the divorce papers, her hand trembling under Richard's glare. She had thought only of escape, of breaking free from a house that suffocated her spirit. Now, alone on a desolate road, she realized the cost of that freedom. Storm clouds blotted out the moon, leaving her in near darkness. Her legs shook, the cold seeping into her bones, making her teeth chatter. Lightning cracked the sky, revealing a road stretched endlessly into the void. She stumbled forward, driven by a stubborn will to survive, though despair whispered that this was her end. Richard's cruelty had peaked that evening in the conservatory, where glass walls amplified the storm's roar. He had entered with a manila envelope, his expression devoid of mercy. "This ends now, Elena, divorce papers. Sign them." She had stared at the documents, her heart pounding. "Can't we talk? There must be another way." "There's no other way. You're empty, a failure. I need a real woman, one who can give me children." The words cut deeper than any blade. "Where will I go? That's not my problem. You have family somewhere, don't you? Return to them. Tonight. In this storm? That's inhumane. It's justice for the years you wasted. Sign, or I'll drag this out in court." Her hands shook as she scrawled her name, tears blurring the ink. He allowed her one suitcase, nothing more. "You came with nothing, you leave with nothing." The finality of his voice was an executioner's blade. Richard watched from the foyer as she packed clothes and mementos into the case, holding her coat like a jailer. "You should have considered the consequences of failing me." Elena met his gaze one last time. "I hope your next wife gives you the heirs you crave, and I hope they grow up to see you for what you are." She stepped into the storm without waiting for his reply. The wind slammed the door shut behind her, and the mansion's lights blazed defiantly against the night. Elena didn't look back, focusing on the road ahead, though rain stung her eyes and soaked her skin. Her shoes disintegrated within minutes, her feet numb from the cold. The suitcase, now a sodden burden, threatened to pull her down. She considered abandoning it, but the thought of losing those last fragments of her identity kept her gripping the handle. The road seemed endless, flanked by trees bending like mourners under the storm's weight. Thunder shook her chest, and breathing became a struggle as rain fell in sheets. Elena's mind flickered to her childhood, nights when storms meant cozy blankets and her father's stories. Here, there was only isolation. She tripped over a tree root, her ankle twisting painfully, and fell hard, the suitcase splashing into a puddle. For a moment, she lay there, rain pounding her back, too exhausted to move. She thought this was how it ends, alone, broken, and discarded like refuse. She rolled onto her back, staring into the black sky, rain pelting her face like accusations. Numbness crept through her limbs, a deceptive mercy. Her eyes fluttered closed, the world fading. A distant sound pierced the storm's roar, not thunder but something mechanical, growing louder. Elena barely registered it, her consciousness slipping. Headlights sliced through the darkness, followed by the squeal of brakes and a car door slamming. Footsteps splashed toward her. "My God, are you hurt?" A man's voice, deep and urgent, broke through her haze. Warm hands touched her face, gentle despite the rain's chill. "Can you hear me? What happened?" Elena shook her head weakly. "Not hurt, and just thrown away. I'm getting you out of this storm." Strong arms slid beneath her, lifting her effortlessly. She felt a broad chest against her cheek, smelling of wood and faint sweetness, like cedar and honey. The man carried her through the rain, his voice steady. "You're safe now, I promise." Darkness pulled her under, but for the first time that night, it felt like surrender rather than defeat. When she awoke, warmth enveloped her, and a foreign sensation startled her. She lay wrapped in soft blankets scented with lavender, on a couch in a room lit by the soft glow of a single lamp. The storm's roar was distant now. Muffled by sturdy walls, the space felt alive, cluttered with books, framed photos, and a faint aroma of fresh bread. Elena tried to sit up, but her body ached, every muscle protesting. "Easy now," a woman's voice cautioned. "Don't move too fast. You were half frozen when you came in." Elena turned to see a woman in her 50s, holding a steaming mug. Her eyes were kind, her hands work-roughened, but steady. "Who are you?" "I'm Clara," the woman said, setting the mug on a nearby table. "My brother Samuel brought you here last night. You were in bad shape, caught in that storm." Memories returned in fragments. The rain, the fall, the headlights. "Samuel, he found me?" "On Route 9, Clara confirmed. "I'm a nurse, so I checked you over. No broken bones, thank God, but you were hypothermic, you needed rest." Elena glanced down, realizing she wore a soft cotton nightgown, not hers. "Your clothes were ruined," Clara added. "I dried your suitcase and put some of my things in the dresser for you." The kindness overwhelmed Elena, tears welling before she could stop them. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cry." Clara sat beside her, taking her hand. "Cry all you need, honey. Whatever put you on that road in a storm wasn't good. You're safe here, that's what matters." The words unlocked something in Elena, and she wept, sobs shaking her frame. Clara stayed, her presence a quiet anchor. When the tears subsided, Clara handed her a tissue. "Better?" Elena nodded, voice caught in her throat. Clara smiled. "Rest more. When you're ready, come downstairs. Samuel will want to know you're awake." Elena lay back, staring at the ceiling, feeling a flicker of hope. The storm had nearly claimed her, but a stranger's compassion had intervened. For the first time in years, she sensed the possibility of a new beginning where warmth, not judgment, awaited. Elena awoke to sunlight filtering through lace curtains, a stark contrast to the cold opulence of the Hayes estate. Samuel Grant's cottage enveloped her in warmth, its wooden walls adorned with family photos and shelves brimming with well-worn books. The air carried the scent of coffee and freshly baked bread, a reminder of home as she once knew it. Her body ached from the storm's ordeal, but the blankets cocooning her felt like a gentle embrace. Samuel's sister, Clara, had left a tray with a mug of tea and a note. "Rest up. Breakfast is ready when you are." The kindness, so freely given, stirred emotions Elena had long suppressed. She rose slowly, testing her bruised ankle, and found clean clothes in the dresser, simple but comfortable. Her suitcase, dried and neatly stored, held her meager possessions, a lifeline to her past. As she dressed, memories of Richard's cruelty flooded back, his accusations of her barrenness cutting deep. Yet here, in this unfamiliar haven, she felt a flicker of safety. Clara appeared at the door, her nurse's gaze assessing. "You look steadier. Hungry?" Elena nodded, following Clara downstairs. The kitchen was a cozy chaos of mismatched mugs and a table scarred with use. Samuel stood at the stove, stirring a pot of oatmeal, his broad shoulders relaxed. He turned, his face breaking into a warm smile. "You're up. Feeling better?" "Much. Thank you for saving me," Elena said, her voice catching. Not everyone would have stopped. Samuel waved off her gratitude. "Couldn't leave you out there. Sit, eat. Oatmeal with apples, my specialty." The meal was simple but nourishing, each bite grounding Elena further. Samuel sat across from her, sipping coffee, calm yet attentive. Clara joined them, her questions gentle but probing. "We don't need your story immediately, but whenever you're ready, we're here." Elena hesitated, the weight of her past pressing down. "My husband threw me out. He said I was useless because I couldn't give him children." Samuel's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed soft. "What kind of man does that in a storm?" "One who never loved me," Elena admitted, staring at her plate. He called me barren, defective. Clara reached for her hand. Honey, bodies don't fail because of love or its lack. Sometimes they need the right conditions. Samuel nodded like wood. You can't force it to take shape. You work with its grain. Give it time to become what it's meant to be. The metaphor resonated, easing Elena's shame. After breakfast, Samuel invited her to see his workshop behind the cottage. The space smelled of sawdust and varnish, tools hung neatly, and a half-finished rocking chair glowed in the morning light. It's for a young couple expecting their first, Samuel explained. They wanted something sturdy like their grandparents had. It's beautiful, Elena said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. It's just potential now, Samuel replied. It takes patience to make it whole, like most things worth building. His words lingered as they returned to the house. Clara suggested Elena stay as long as needed, and though pride urged her to refuse, she had nowhere else to go. Days unfolded gently, each one a step away from the Hayes estate's toxicity. Samuel left early for his carpentry jobs, building homes for local families, but always left notes. Coffee's on, fruit's out. Take the day slow, Elena. Clara visited afternoons, bringing groceries or flowers, her fussing tempered with humor. Clara teased, "You're looking less like a drowned cat one day and handing Elena a bouquet of daisies. My brother's cooking must agree with you." Elena laughed, a sound that surprised her. "He's persistent." "He's a fixer," Clara said, her eyes sharp. "Always rescuing strays, whether cats or people. But don't think he's pitying you. He sees something real." The words planted a seed of trust. Elena began helping with small tasks, such as weeding the garden or chopping vegetables for dinner. The physical work soothed her, each pull of a weed or stir of a pot a reclamation of agency. She confided in Clara about her fears of infertility, the years of blame eroding her self-worth. Clara, practical yet empathetic, shared her own story of loss, a miscarriage that had tested her resilience. "You're not broken, Elena. Sometimes the soil just isn't right." Evenings brought quiet moments with Samuel. They sat on the porch, watching fireflies, their conversations weaving between mundane and profound. He spoke of his past, a fiancé lost to illness, teaching him to cherish small acts of kindness. "I vowed to pay it forward," he said. "Finding you was my chance." Elena felt a warmth she hadn't known since childhood. Samuel invited her back to the workshop one afternoon, handing her sandpaper. "Let me show you how to work with the grain." He guided her hands, patient as she learned to smooth rough edges. "You can't rush it, force it, and the wood fights back." "Is that your philosophy for everything?" Elena asked, half smiling. "Pretty much. Houses, furniture, people. Respect what they are. Help them become their best selves." The lesson mirrored her own healing. She began journaling again, filling pages with reflections on her marriage, recognizing Richard's coldness as a reflection of his insecurities, not her failings. Flashbacks to his accusations triggered anxiety, but Samuel and Clara noticed, offering space to breathe or a distraction through shared tasks. One night, as they washed dishes together, Elena admitted, "I thought I was barren. What if he was right?" Samuel dried his hands, meeting her gaze. "You were in a place that stifled life. Here, you might find you bloom differently." His words sparked hope, but also fear. Elena wrestled with trust, her heart scarred from betrayal. Yet Samuel's consistency, his lack of demands, began to dismantle her defenses. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, he shared a story of building a community center, how each beam needed care to stand firm. "You're like that, Elena. Strong, but you've been under pressure. Give yourself time." She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. For the first time she felt seen, not as a failure, but as a person with potential. The cottage became a sanctuary, its rhythms of daily life knitting her back together. She helped Clara bake bread and knead a meditation. She tended Samuel's garden, coaxing seedlings from the soil, seeing parallels to her rebirth. Neighbors dropped by with casseroles, their warmth starkly contrasted to the Hayes estate's isolation. As weeks passed, Elena noticed a shift. Her laughter came easier, her shoulders less tense. Samuel caught her eye during a shared joke, and she felt a flutter. She was not in love yet, but it was possible. With its creaking floors and overflowing bookshelves, the cottage was no mansion, but was alive with care. Elena began to believe she could rebuild, that the woman Richard discarded was not gone, but waiting to bloom in fertile soil. The storm's scars lingered, but she sensed a new chapter dawning in this haven of kindness. Elena stood on the porch of Samuel Grant's cottage, the late summer breeze carrying the scent of blooming lavender. The world felt softer here, far from the Hayes estate's sterile grandeur. Days had woven into weeks, each one stitching her spirit back together. Samuel left early for his carpentry work, building homes for families in town, but his presence lingered in small gestures. A bowl of peaches on the counter, a note scrawled on a scrap of wood. "Good morning, Elena. Coffee's ready. Try the book by the window, it's a good one. Clara's coming by later. Be patient with her fussing." The simplicity of his care, so unlike Richard's calculated indifference, grounded her in ways she hadn't thought possible. The cottage buzzed with life, its walls absorbing laughter and the clatter of dishes. Elena had begun to find her place, helping Clara with chores or tending the garden where tomatoes ripened under her care. The community embraced her, and neighbors dropped off homemade jams or invited her to book clubs. Their warmth contrasted sharply with the Hayes staff's whispered judgments. And Elena felt her old self, the girl who laughed freely at family dinners, stirring awake. Yet shadows of her past lingered. Nightly she journaled, pouring out memories of Richard's cruelty, his accusations of barrenness that had hollowed her. Anxiety crept in, tightening her chest, but Clara noticed, offering tea and quiet talks to ease the panic. Samuel was steady, never pushing for more than Elena could give. Their evenings on the porch grew longer, conversations weaving from his work to her childhood dreams of teaching. One night, under a sky streaked with pink, he shared a story of loss, a sister who died young, shaping his resolve to build spaces where families could thrive. "I build homes for memories," he said, "places where kids can grow, where love lives." "That's beautiful," Elena replied, her voice soft. "You make it sound like poetry." "It is just made of wood and nails." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "You're building something too, Elena. A new life, piece by piece." The words struck deep, and she felt a warmth she hadn't known since before Richard. Her trust, battered by years of neglect, began to mend. Samuel taught her woodworking in his workshop, guiding her hands to sand oak planks, showing her how patience revealed beauty beneath roughness. "You can't force the grain," he said. "You work with it. Let it show you what it wants to be." "Is that how you see people too?" she asked, half teasing. "Mostly. Everyone's got their own grain. You need to respect it." His philosophy mirrored his actions, offering her space to heal without demands. Elena's confidence grew, reflected in small acts, sewing curtains for the cottage, baking bread with Clara, laughing at neighbors' stories. But doubts about her body persisted, Richard's words echoing, "You're defective." One evening, as they weeded the garden, she confided in Samuel. "What if he was right? What if I can't have children?" Samuel knelt beside her, brushing dirt from his hands. "That house was poison, Elena. It wasn't you. Bodies know when they're safe, when they're loved." His certainty sparked hope, but also fear. Could love truly change her fate? As summer deepened, their bond grew, marked by accidental touches in the kitchen and shared smiles over coffee. One evening, under a canopy of stars, Samuel took her hand, his calloused fingers gentle. "I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you." Elena's breath caught, her instinct to pull away warring with a longing to stay. Richard's proposal had been a transaction, a diamond ring offered with an obligation. Samuel's eyes held no expectation, only truth. "You don't have to say anything," he continued. "I want you to know you've brought light to my life." She squeezed his hand, emotions tangling her words. "You make me feel whole again, not a failure. I didn't think anyone could do that. You were always whole," he said. "You just needed someone to see it." The moment marked a turning point. Elena wasn't ready to confess love, but the possibility bloomed. Days later, Samuel knelt before her on the porch, holding a wooden ring he'd carved, inlaid with tiny daisies, each petal a testament to his care. "Elena, I know you've been hurt. I won't rush you, but I want a life with you, as equals, building a home where your heart can rest. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, not from pain but from joy. "Yes, Samuel, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, its fit was perfect, and pulled her into an embrace that felt like home. Their wedding was simple, held in the backyard, under an oak Samuel had planted years ago. Clara and a few friends stood witness, their cheers mingling with birdsong. Elena's vows were heartfelt. "I promise to grow with you, to fill our home with love I've saved." Samuel's voice was steady. "I promise to build a space where laughter lives, where you're always safe." Their marriage was everything her first had not been. Samuel touched her with reverence, his affection a balm to old wounds. They shared meals, dreams, and quiet nights, their intimacy free of pressure. Elena added touches to the cottage, sewing pillows, planting herbs, making it theirs. Soon, she noticed changes: fatigue, smell sensitivity, and faint nausea at dawn. She dismissed it as stress, but Clara's sharp eyes caught the signs.
"Elena, have you been tracking your cycles?"
Clara asked one afternoon, chopping carrots. Elena frowned, counting back.
"I haven't thought about it. With everything, I stopped keeping track."
Clara's smile was knowing.
"You should see a doctor, just to be sure."
Fear gripped Elena, Richard's words resurfacing.
"I can't. He said I was barren. Did you ever see a doctor together?"
Clara pressed gently.
"Or believe what he told you?"
The question stunned her. Richard had refused joint testing, insisting the fault was hers. She'd internalized his verdict without proof. "Let's find out for sure," Clara urged, her voice firm but kind. The doctor's visit loomed like a judgment. Samuel held her hand as they waited, his calm anchoring her nerves. The examination was thorough, followed by an ultrasound. The technician's smile was wide. "You're definitely pregnant, Mrs. Grant, and not with one baby, but 4. Elena's world tilted. 4? Quadruplets? 4 heartbeats, the technician confirmed, turning the screen to show 4 tiny forms. Samuel's eyes glistened, his grip tightening. 4 babies, Elena. We're having 4. Tears spilled as Clara, waiting nearby, laughed through her own tears. The drive home was silent, awe and disbelief mingling. In the cottage, Samuel pulled her close. "You were never barren. You just needed love's soil to bloom." Elena pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the first stirrings of a miracle she'd thought impossible. Proof that her body had waited for safety and love to create life. Elena stood in the nursery Samuel had crafted, her hand resting on her swelling belly, marveling at the life within. The room glowed with soft blues and yellows, its walls adorned with a mural of stars Samuel had painted, each stroke a promise to their unborn children. The ultrasound had revealed 4 tiny heartbeats, quadruplets, a revelation that shattered the lie of her barrenness. The doctor, a kind woman with years of experience, had explained that stress and emotional strain could suppress fertility, and Elena's toxic years with Richard had likely played a role. No physical defect, just a body waiting for safety. Samuel, ever steady, had wept openly at the news, his joy infectious. "You were never broken," he said that night, his voice fierce with love. "Your body knew that place wasn't right. These babies waited for us." Elena clung to his words, a lifeline against the echoes of Richard's cruelty. The pregnancy was daunting, 4 lives growing within her, demanding strength she wasn't sure she possessed. Fatigue set in early, her body straining under the weight of creation. Mornings brought nausea, eased only by Clara's ginger tea and Samuel's gentle humor. He'd tease her about craving pickles with ice cream, fetching them without complaint, his laughter a balm. Elena, in turn, found joy in small moments, like feeling the first flutters of movement, proof of miracles she'd thought impossible. The community rallied around them, transforming the cottage into a support hub. Neighbors brought hand-knitted blankets, casseroles, and stories of their own children, weaving Elena into their fold. With her nurse's instincts, Clara monitored her closely, ensuring rest and nutrition. "We're not taking chances with 4, she'd say, half scolding, half laughing. Elena felt the town's embrace was so different from the Hayes estate's cold isolation, where staff judged and Richard condemned. Here, she was family, not a failure. Samuel carefully expanded the cottage, adding a nursery with rounded corners and sturdy cribs. He carved wooden mobiles, stars and moons swaying gently, each piece infused with love. Elena sewed curtains, her stitches uneven but proud, adding warmth to the space. The physical demands of pregnancy tested her, with backaches and swollen ankles, but Samuel was there, rubbing her feet or reading aloud to distract her. One night, as they lay together, he spoke to her belly, his voice low. "You 4 are already loved. Can't wait to meet you." Elena laughed through tears. "You're going to spoil them." "Good," he grinned. "They deserve it. So do you." The pregnancy wasn't without fear. Elena's past trauma surfaced in quiet moments, nightmares of Richard's voice calling her defective. She confided in Clara during a garden walk, the scent of rosemary grounding her. "I'm scared I'll fail them. What if I'm not enough?" Clara squeezed her hand. "You walked away from a man who broke you. You're rebuilding. That's strength enough for 4. Medical visits became routine, each ultrasound a marvel. The doctor warned of risks. Quadruplets were rare and complex, but Elena's health was robust, bolstered by love and support. Clara attended every appointment, her knowledge easing Elena's anxiety. Samuel held her hand, his presence a constant. The technician once chuckled, "These kids are active. They're going to keep you busy." Elena smiled, imagining their personalities. Busy sounds perfect. As her belly grew, so did her confidence. She journaled daily, not of pain, but of hope, sketching names and dreams for her children. The community threw a baby shower, a joyful affair with homemade cakes and children running underfoot. Gifts piled high, practical and heartfelt, diapers, tiny socks, a quilt stitched by the town's older women. Elena felt a pang of gratitude, contrasting this warmth with the Hayes estate's sterile galas. Here, love was currency, not wealth. Labor came early, as expected with multiples. Pain gripped Elena at dawn, contractions fierce and unrelenting. Samuel drove her to the hospital, Clara in the backseat, coaching her breathing. "You've got this," Clara urged. "Bring those babies home." The delivery was a grueling marathon, 12 hours of intensity. Complications arose, one baby's position causing concern, but the medical team was skilled, guiding Elena through with precision. Samuel never left her side, his hand in hers, whispering encouragements. "You're so strong, Elena. You're doing it." Exhaustion blurred time, but determination fueled her. She pushed through pain, fear, and doubt, each effort bringing her closer to her children. Finally, cries filled the room, for distinct voices announcing their arrival. 2 boys, 2 girls, each perfect despite their tiny size. The nurses placed them in her arms, Samuel helping to steady them, and Elena's world shifted. Their faces, wrinkled and new, were miracles she'd been told were impossible. Samuel's tears fell freely. "Look at them, Elena. Look at what you did." "You did this too," she whispered, voice hoarse. "We did." They named their children with care. Aiden, bold and curious. Lucas, thoughtful and calm. Sophia, gentle and wise. Olivia, fierce and vibrant. Each name was a prayer, a testament to their improbable existence. The hospital room became a sanctuary, filled with soft coos and the weight of new life. Clara, beaming, snapped photos, already planning to spoil her nieces and nephews. "You're a warrior," she told Elena, kissing her forehead. Recovery was slow, Elena's body drained but triumphant. Samuel stayed close, changing diapers with clumsy hands, learning alongside her. The hospital staff marveled at the quadruplets, a rare joy in their ward. Back home, the cottage adapted to chaos, cribs crowding the nursery, bottles lining the counter. Neighbors continued their support, dropping off meals or rocking a baby so Elena could rest. She felt the weight of motherhood, exhilarating and overwhelming. But Samuel's partnership made it bearable. One evening, as they sat amidst scattered toys, Elena reflected on her journey. Watching Aiden grasp Samuel's finger, she said these four were never impossible for Samuel. They just needed us to be ready. Samuel pulled her close. They needed you to be free, to be loved. She nodded, tears of gratitude welling. The lie of her barrenness, sown in Richard's toxic soil, had been uprooted. Her body, once stifled, had bloomed in love's embrace. The quadruplets were proof, not just of biology, but of resilience, of a heart that refused to break completely. Elena looked at her family, the cottage alive with their presence, and knew this was only the beginning. Her past was a shadow, fading against the light of her new life, where love nurtured miracles beyond imagining. While Elena bloomed in the warmth of Samuel's cottage, Richard Hayes found himself trapped in a cage of his own making. His second marriage, to Sophia Vance, was a calculated alliance, born from a desire to erase Elena's failure and secure the heir he believed was his due. Sophia, a social media influencer with a knack for turning moments into viral content, had entered his life at a charity gala, her laughter cutting through the room like a spotlight. She was everything Elena was not: bold, glamorous, and unapologetically ambitious. Dazzled by her polished exterior, Richard saw her as the solution to his tarnished legacy. Their courtship was swift, a whirlwind of photo ops and society page headlines, culminating in a wedding that screamed extravagance but lacked soul. Sophia moved into the Hayes estate like a conqueror, redecorating with garish colors and modern art that clashed with the mansion's elegance. The soft neutrals Elena had chosen were replaced with gold accents and bold patterns, each change a statement of Sophia's dominance. She hired photographers, led by a charismatic young man named Damien, to document her life in the estate, curating a social media presence that drew thousands of followers. Every post was staged, from breakfasts she barely ate to parties she hosted for clout. The reality was starkly different. The mansion felt like a showroom, not a home, its rooms echoing superficially. Richard, buried in work to maintain the wealth Sophia spent freely, came home to a wife more interested in her phone than in him. "Do you have to work late again?" She'd pout, scrolling through comments. "There's a gallery opening tonight. I need you there for photos." "I have meetings tomorrow," he'd reply, exhaustion creeping into his voice. "I can't stay out." "You're so dull," she'd snap, her words sharp but veiled in a laugh. "This is why I should have picked someone with more spark." The barb stung, revealing the transactional nature of their bond. Sophia had married for the Hayes name and fortune, while Richard sought a trophy wife to produce the children Elena couldn't. Neither found what they wanted. Sophia's spending was relentless, bills piling up for designer clothes, spa retreats, and photography sessions that seemed to multiply. When Richard suggested a budget, she laughed. "We're rich, darling. Don't be tacky. We're rich because I work for it," he countered. "We need to manage resources." "Manage them yourself," she retorted. "I'm not living like a pauper." The tension grew, mirrored by the mansion's increasing chaos. Sophia hosted lavish events, filling the house with strangers who posed for her posts. Richard retreated to his study, avoiding the noise, but the emptiness followed him. He passed the nursery Elena had once lingered outside, its door still locked, and felt a pang he couldn't name. His mother's ghost haunted him, her final words warning against trading substance for shine. He had dismissed her then, but now doubt crept in. Sophia's pregnancy announcement came not to him but to her followers, a staged post with pastel balloons and the caption dripping with emojis. Richard saw it on his phone during a meeting, his stomach twisting. He said, "You didn't tell me that evening," finding her editing photos in their bedroom. "I did, just not first," she said unbothered. "My audience was waiting." "Does your audience matter more than me?" "Don't be dramatic. You know now. What's the difference?" The difference was everything, but Sophia didn't care. The announcement fueled her social media empire, with likes and comments pouring in. She began planning a baby shower and hiring an event planner, a top-tier caterer, and Damien for exclusive photos. Every detail was crafted for virality, not intimacy. Richard played his role, smiling for the cameras, but felt like a prop in her performance. He noticed her lingering glances at Damien and how she touched his arm during shoots, but pushed the suspicion aside as paranoia. The topic of children had always been fraught. Early in their marriage, Sophia deflected. "I'm not ready to ruin my figure," she'd say, waving off Richard's hints. Now, her sudden pregnancy raised questions he couldn't ignore. Was it convenience or something else? He recalled his mother's secrecy, rumors of hidden tests surfacing among relatives after her death. A cousin had let slip that Evelyn had Richard tested for fertility during a routine physical, results locked away to protect the family name. The possibility gnawed at him, but he buried it, unwilling to face the truth. Sophia's photography sessions with Damien grew frequent, often when Richard was away. He'd return to find them in the drawing room, Sophia draped over furniture, Damien's camera clicking. "Is this necessary?" Richard asked once, his tone sharp. "It's my career," she snapped. "You wouldn't understand." Damien packed up quickly, avoiding Richard's gaze. The air felt charged, Sophia's smiles to the photographer too familiar. Richard's colleagues began asking pointed questions at dinners. "When's the air coming, Hayes? Time's ticking." The pressure, once directed at Elena, now turned on him, amplifying his unease. One night, alone in his study, Richard opened a bottle of scotch and stared at the nursery door. What if Elena had been right? What if the problem was never hers? The thought was poison, spreading doubt through his carefully constructed world. He had divorced her for failing to produce, yet here he was, in another childless marriage. Or so he thought until Sophia's post. If she were pregnant and he was the issue, whose child was it? Sophia's baby shower planning consumed her, a spectacle to cement her status. She obsessed over details, imported roses, custom linens, a cake designed for photos, not taste. One evening, she dropped a bombshell. "I'm inviting Elena." Richard froze. "Why?" "It'll be iconic," she said, her smile sharp. "The barren ex-wife watching the fertile new one. My followers will love it. That's vicious. It's smart. She's probably moved on. It'll be fine." Richard should have refused to protect Elena from this cruelty, but a dark part wanted her to see his new life and feel the sting of his success. He agreed, ignoring the twist in his gut. The invitation went out, and a gilded card was sent to an address he barely remembered. Sophia's excitement grew as the event neared, but Richard felt only dread, sensing the stage was set for a reckoning he couldn't predict. Once a symbol of his power, the mansion now felt like a gilded cage, its walls closing in as truths he'd buried began to surface. Sophia Vance's baby shower was a meticulously orchestrated spectacle, designed to dominate social media and cement her status among the elite. The Hayes estate transformed into a pastel paradise, with blush roses flown in from Paris, and gold-dusted macarons arranged in towering displays. Every detail, from the custom linen napkins to the string quartet, was curated for maximum impact. Sophia oversaw it all, radiant in a flowing gown, her phone never far, snapping candid shots for her followers. She had hired Damien, her favored photographer, to capture every moment, his lens trained on her as she posed with calculated grace. The event was less about the baby and more about her brand, a performance to outshine any rival. Despite his forced smiles, Richard stood at her side, playing the proud husband. Guests arrived in designer attire, their compliments laced with envy, each vying for the perfect photo angle. Sophia thrived in the spotlight, her laughter ringing false to Richard's ears. He noticed her frequent glances at Damien, how she adjusted her hair when he aimed his camera, and her hand lingering on his arm when giving instructions. "He's just a photographer," Richard told himself, pushing down the unease that had grown since her pregnancy announcement. The post, shared with thousands before him, still stung, a public declaration that relegated him to an afterthought. Sophia's decision to invite Elena was calculated, pitched over dinner weeks ago. "It'll be dramatic," she'd said, her eyes gleaming. "Your ex, the barren one, is watching me celebrate what she couldn't give you. Content gold." "It's cruel," Richard had protested, but weakly. A vindictive part of him, still bruised by Elena's perceived failure, wanted her to see his new life, to feel the weight of his success. He'd agreed, sending the invitation to an address Clara had once provided. As guests mingled and cameras flashed, he felt a nod of dread. Sophia checked her phone obsessively, monitoring likes and comments, hissing at Richard to smile more. "You look miserable. This is my day." He adjusted his expression, but his mind wandered to the nursery, which had been locked since Elena's departure, its pastel walls a silent rebuke. What if he had been wrong? The thought, once fleeting, now gnawed relentlessly, fueled by whispers of his mother's hidden fertility tests. The room hushed as Elena entered, and Richard's breath caught. She was unrecognizable from the hollow-eyed woman he'd cast out. Her skin glowed, her posture confident, and at her side were 4 children, each clutching her hand, their curious eyes scanning the opulent room. Behind her stood a tall man with kind eyes and calloused hands, unmistakably her husband, Samuel Grant, Richard realized, the carpenter who'd given her what he never could. The children, quadruplets, were a living contradiction to the label he'd pinned on her, Barren. The math was staggering. 4 healthy lives born soon after their divorce, a timeline that screamed his error. Sophia's smile faltered, her triumph upstaged. "Elena, how lovely," she said, her voice syrupy but strained. "And you brought guests." "These are my children," Elena replied, her tone steady. "Aiden, Lucas, Sophia, Olivia. And this is my husband, Samuel." "How remarkable," Sophia managed, her eyes darting to the whispering guests. 4 children. I didn't know you'd remarried." The room buzzed, conversations shifting from Sophia's glow to Elena's miracle. Guests approached Elena, charmed by the children's politeness, their laughter contrasting with the event's polished veneer. Samuel's hand rested lightly on Elena's back, a gesture of quiet support that Richard envied. He stared, unable to reconcile this radiant woman with the one he'd dismissed. If she could bear 4 children, the problem had never been hers. The implication struck like lightning. He was the flaw. Sophia gripped his arm, her nails digging in. "Stop staring," she hissed. "You're embarrassing me." "How is this possible?" he murmured, dazed. "She moved on and had kids." "It's not a miracle. Get over it." But it was a miracle, or worse, proof of his failure. The children's ages suggested Elena conceived soon after leaving him, with a man who offered love where Richard gave only scorn. His mother's secrecy, the hidden tests, loomed larger. Had she known he was infertile and let him blame Elena to protect the family name? The thought was poison, unraveling his worldview. The shower continued in a blur. Sophia cut the cake, posing with calculated charm, but the spotlight had shifted. Guests fawned over Elena's family. Their joy was authentic and not staged. Richard drifted to the edge of the room, his role as host forgotten. Elena approached him during a lull, her children playing nearby with Samuel watching. "Hello, Richard." His throat tightened. "Elena, your children are beautiful. Thank you. They're my everything. I didn't know you'd remarried." "There's much you never knew," she said, her voice calm but pointed. "You never tried to learn. How old are they?" He needed to know, to confirm the damning timeline. "I got pregnant soon after our divorce. Samuel and I married first, of course." The words landed like blows. She'd been with him for years, childless, yet she'd created 4 lives in months with Samuel. "We never saw doctors together," she continued. "You insisted I was the problem and refused to consider otherwise. I thought," he stammered, unable to finish. "You thought what you wanted to believe. Bodies know when they're not safe, Richard. Love matters more than you understand." One of her daughters, Olivia, tugged her hand. "Mama, this place is too shiny." "Can we go home?" "Soon, sweetheart," Elena said, smiling. She looked at Richard one last time. "Congratulations on your child. I hope this marriage brings you peace." She rejoined her family, their unity starkly contrasted to the artifice around them. Sophia's anger was palpable as she pulled him aside. "She ruined my event. Everyone's talking about her, not me." "You invited her," Richard said, his voice hollow. "I thought she'd be broken, alone, not this." The admission revealed Sophia's cruelty, mirroring his own. Richard retreated to his study, the noise of the party fading. He stared at the locked nursery door, the weight of his mistakes crushing. Elena's children were proof he'd destroyed a woman who could have given him everything if only he'd been capable. Sophia's pregnancy, once a beacon, now sparked doubt. Whose child was it? The question festered, setting the stage for a confrontation unraveling his gilded world. The baby shower's pastel glow faded, leaving Richard Hayes alone in his study, the Hayes estate's silence louder than ever. Sophia's triumph had crumbled under Elena's radiant arrival with her quadruplets, a living rebuke to the lie Richard had lived. The guests had departed, whispering about the first wife's miracle, their words slicing through his carefully constructed world. Sophia retreated upstairs, furiously editing photos to salvage her social media narrative, but Richard's mind was elsewhere, fixated on a truth he could no longer ignore. The nursery door, locked since Elena's exile, loomed in his thoughts, symbolizing his failure. He poured a scotch, the burn doing little to dull the growing dread. Elena's children, Aiden, Lucas, Sophia, and Olivia, were undeniable proof she was never barren. The timeline haunted him. Her pregnancy followed so soon after their divorce, conceived in the warmth of Samuel's love. Richard's certainty in his flawless lineage, reinforced by his mother Evelyn's insistence, now felt like a house of cards. Whispers of her secrecy had surfaced at the funeral, a cousin's vague mention of hidden tests. Richard had dismissed it then, but Elena's 4 children demanded answers. Had he been the broken one all along? He contacted his mother's old physician, a man now retired but reachable through family connections. After several calls, Richard secured access to medical files from his marriage to Elena, buried in Evelyn's private records. The documents arrived by courier, and he spread them across his desk like evidence at a trial. Elena's tests were clear, no fertility issues noted, but a second file, marked with his name, stopped his breath. Results from a physical he'd thought routine, ordered by Evelyn without his knowledge. Severely low sperm count, poor motility, natural conception highly unlikely. The clinical words burned, confirming his infertility, a truth his mother had concealed to protect the Hayes name. Richard's hands trembled as he dialed the doctor. "Why wasn't I told?" "Your mother requested the tests be discreet," the doctor replied, voice heavy. "She met with me privately and insisted the family reputation couldn't bear the truth. I assumed she'd discussed it with you. I'm sorry." Richard hung up, rage and grief colliding. Evelyn had let him blame Elena and had watched him destroy a woman for a lie she'd buried. His arrogance had fueled it, never questioning his own perfection. With its marble and chandeliers, the estate felt like a mausoleum, entombing his mistakes. But a darker question emerged. If he was infertile, whose child did Sophia carry? Her sudden pregnancy announced to followers before him. Her closeness with Damien, the photographer, took on sinister weight. He climbed the stairs, finding Sophia in bed, scrolling through her phone. "The shower was a disaster," she muttered. "Your ex stole my spotlight." "We need to talk," Richard said, his voice low. "When did you get pregnant?" She glanced up, annoyed. "Why does it matter? Sometime this spring. The weekend I was in Chicago." Her eyes flickered, a flash of guilt. "Maybe. I wasn't tracking." "Were you with Damien that weekend?" She closed her laptop, indignant. "He came for a shoot. So what? Is that baby mine?" The question hung like a guillotine. Sophia's face cycled through shock, anger, and denial. "How dare you? I'm your wife. Of course it's yours." "I'm infertile," Richard said, holding up the medical file. "My mother hid it, but the tests don't lie. I couldn't father children with Elena, and I can't with you. So whose is it?" Sophia paled, standing to wrap her robe tighter. "You're insane. This is because of Elena. She's showing up with those kids. Please answer me. Is it Damien's?" "I won't be interrogated in my own home," she snapped, moving toward the door. "It's my home," Richard said, his voice dangerously calm. "And if that child isn't mine, you leave with nothing. The prenup is clear about infidelity." Sophia's defiance cracked, her eyes calculating. "Fine. You want a divorce? I'll give you one. Not until we confirm paternity. I won't be played for a fool." She grabbed her phone and stormed to the guest wing, her voice echoing as she made calls, likely to Damien. Richard sank into a chair, the file still in hand. His second marriage was unraveling, just as the first had, but he couldn't blame his wife this time. He was the common thread, the architect of his own ruin. Elena's words at the shower replayed, "Bodies know when they're unsafe. Love matters more than you understand." He had offered neither, only demands and scorn. The next morning, Richard hired an investigator, driven by a need for truth. The report arrived swiftly, its contents damning. Photos showed Sophia and Damien at hotels. Their body language was intimate. Receipts detailed dinners when Richard was away, and text messages reveal plans to pass the child off as his. One message seared into his mind: he'll never know. The baby gets his name, his money. We need to be careful. The betrayal was complete. Sophia had married him for wealth, and her pregnancy was a calculated move to secure it. Richard had called Elena barren while he was the infertile one, had divorced her for failing to give what he couldn't provide. Now, he was bound to a woman who saw him as a bank, not a partner. The irony was suffocating. He confronted Sophia in the dining room. The investigator's report spread before him. "Explain this." She scanned the pages, her face paling. "You spied on me. You cheated. The baby's Damien. You planned to deceive me." Sophia's mask slipped, her voice cold. "You married me for a trophy. I married you for security. We both used each other. But you're worse, Richard. You destroyed Elena for nothing, blaming her for your own flaw." The truth stung. Her words mirrored his guilt. "I didn't know," he said, but it sounded hollow. "You didn't want to know," she retorted. "You're a coward, hiding behind your name." She packed that day, leaving for Damien's apartment, her social media posts spinning a tale of empowerment. Richard sat alone, the mansion's opulence mocking him. Society turned, whispers of his infertility spreading like wildfire. Colleagues distanced themselves, their respect replaced by pity. He thought of Elena, her children's laughter, Samuel's love, a life he could have had if he'd been different. The realization crushed him. He had traded substance for illusion, love for status, and now stood in a gilded cage of his own making, with nothing but regret to fill it. The Hayes estate loomed emptier than ever, its marble halls echoing with the weight of Richard's unraveling life. Sophia's departure left a void, her betrayal confirmed by the investigators' damning evidence. The divorce papers were filed with clinical precision, and society, once his ally, turned vicious. Whispers of his infertility spread through elite circles, fueled by Sophia's parting shots on social media, her posts veiled but pointed. 2 failed marriages. He must be the problem. The man who called his first wife barren is barren himself. The irony stung. A public humiliation mirrored the private shame he'd inflicted on Elena. Richard buried himself in work, but the boardroom offered no refuge. Colleagues who once courted his favor now avoided his gaze, their respect eroded by gossip. Evelyn, the family name fiercely protected by his mother, was now a punchline. Relatives admitted, in hushed confessions, that they'd known of her deception, the hidden fertility tests that shielded Richard's flaw to preserve the Hayes legacy. "They let me destroy an innocent woman," he told a cousin, voice raw. "To protect what? A lie?" "We thought we were protecting you," she replied weakly. "Your mother believed the truth would ruin the family. It ruined me," he said, walking away. Once a symbol of triumph, the mansion felt like a prison, its opulence meaningless without connection. The breaking point came at a family dinner, hosted by his brother to feign unity. The table was laden with fine china, but the air was thick with judgment. A cousin, emboldened by wine, remarked, "It's unfortunate, Richard, but you brought this on yourself." Richard clenched his jaw, letting it pass. Then his uncle added, "Elena was always kind. Such a shame you treated her so poorly." The final blow came from his brother's wife. At least Elena found happiness with that carpenter and their 4 children. Something snapped. "Those children should have been mine," Richard said, voice rising. "She was capable, always was. I'm the infertile one. My mother knew, hid it, let me blame her. You all knew or suspected and said nothing." The table fell silent. His brother tried to intervene. "Richard, let's talk privately. Number, You all stood by while I destroyed her, protecting a name that means nothing now. That's not loyalty, it's betrayal. He stormed out, the weight of his words lingering. Driving aimlessly, Richard found himself on Samuel's street, drawn to the modest cottage he'd looked up after the baby shower. He parked, watching through the windows as Elena moved through the kitchen, Samuel beside her, their 4 children chattering over dinner. The scene was alive with warmth, laughter spilling into the night, starkly contrasting his mansion's sterile quiet. This was the life he'd thrown away, trading love for pride. A knock on his car window startled him. Samuel stood there, expression neutral. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," Richard said, rolling down the window. "I'm sorry. I just needed to see. Since you're here, come inside. Elena saw you. She wants to talk." Richard hesitated, feeling like a condemned man, but followed. The cottage was everything his estate was not. Small, cluttered, vibrant with life. Photos lined the walls, toys scattered underfoot. Elena met him at the door, her presence calm but resolute. "Hello, Richard." "I shouldn't have come," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry." "It's fine. Come in. The children are eating, but we can talk in the living room." She led him to a cozy space with handcrafted furniture, contrasting his mansion's cold luxury. Through the doorway, Richard saw the quadruplets at the kitchen table, Aiden telling a story, Samuel laughing. Elena sat, her gaze steady. "I heard about Sophia. I'm sorry." "Why apologize? She used me. I deserved it." "No one deserves betrayal," she said, her kindness cutting deeper than anger. "Not even you." Richard swallowed hard. "I was wrong about everything. You weren't Barren. I was. My mother hid the tests. I destroyed our marriage over a lie." "I know," Elena said. "Clara has connections in the medical community." She heard after the shower. "And you're not angry?" "I was for a long time. But anger's heavy, Richard. I have 4 children who need me to be present, not bitter. I let it go." "How?" "I called you Barren, threw you out in a storm and blamed you for my failure. You live with that. I don't have to carry it anymore." Elena's voice was firm, free of malice. "Those children came from love, from a home built on respect. They wouldn't have come from our marriage, even if you'd been fertile. It was poisoned from the start." "I poisoned it," he admitted, tears burning. "I'm sorry. It's too late, but I need you to know." "I hear you. I've forgiven you. Go home, Richard. Find a way to forgive yourself." One of the boys, Lucas, ran in, pausing at the sight of Richard. "Mama, who's this?" "Someone I used to know," Elena said, ruffling his hair. "He's leaving soon." Samuel appeared, his presence signaling the end of the conversation. Elena walked Richard to the door. "Your children, your life, it's beautiful," he said, voice breaking. "Yes," she agreed, "it is." She closed the door gently, and Richard stood in the darkness, staring at the glowing cottage. He returned to his car, the weight of his mistakes suffocating. Elena had rebuilt from the ruins he'd left, while he remained trapped in a cycle of his own making. The drive back to the estate was silent, the mansion's lights cold against the night. Richard sat in his study, days later, the medical files still spread across his desk. He traced the words that condemned him. Infertile, a truth he'd never suspected. His mother's deception, his family's silence, and his arrogance conspired to destroy a woman who deserved better. Sophia's betrayal was merely the final act in a play he'd scripted himself. He thought of Elena's children, their laughter a testament to love's power, and knew he'd traded that for a hollow empire. The phone rang, his lawyer's voice cutting through. "The divorce is finalized," Sophia signed without contest. "You're free." Free, the word mocked him. Free to live in a mansion that held no warmth. Free to face a society that scorned him. Free to regret the life he could have had. Richard looked around, the chandeliers gleaming, the walls lined with art, all worthless without love. Elena's forgiveness was a gift he didn't deserve, and the realization broke him. He had lost not just 2 wives, but himself. And the echoes of that regret would linger long after the lights of his gilded cage dimmed. The courthouse steps gleamed under the midday sun, starkly contrasting the storm that had once cast Elena out. Richard Hayes stood alone, clutching divorce papers that severed his bond with Sophia, their ink a final marker of his second failure. The proceedings had been swift, Sophia's signature uncontested, her departure to Damien's side a public spectacle that fueled gossip. Whispers of Richard's infertility and Sophia's infidelity had spread through the town's elite, turning his once revered name into a cautionary tale. He felt the weight of onlookers' eyes, their phones discreetly capturing the man who'd fallen from grace. Then, fate delivered its final twist. Alina appeared, descending the steps with Samuel and their 4 children, Aiden, Lucas, Sophia, and Olivia, their laughter cutting through the murmurs. Alina's presence was magnetic, her confidence a far cry from the broken woman Richard had discarded. She wore a simple dress, her wooden ring glinting, a symbol of love crafted by Samuel's hands. The children clustered around her, their energy infectious, drawing smiles from passers-by. Samuel walked a step behind, his steady gaze offering her strength. They were there for a routine legal matter, perhaps a property deed for their expanding cottage. But to Richard, it felt orchestrated, a public stage for his reckoning. The crowd sensed it too, their whispers growing as phones emerged, capturing the unfolding drama. Richard froze, the papers in his hand trembling. Elena spotted him, her expression calm but resolute. She murmured to Samuel, who nodded, keeping the children occupied as she approached. "Richard," she said, her voice clear, carrying to the onlookers. "I heard your divorce was finalized. I need to say something before we leave." He braced himself, expecting anger, but her eyes held only clarity. "You called me Barren," she began, her words measured but piercing. "You threw me out, believing I was empty, incapable of giving you what you demanded. You built a life on that lie, tearing ours apart because you couldn't face your flaws." The crowd hushed, every ear straining. Richard's throat tightened, shame rooting him to the spot. Elena gestured to her children, who played nearby, oblivious to the tension. "Look at what I built from the ruins you left." These 4 souls, Aiden, Lucas, Sophia, and Olivia, came from love, from a partnership rooted in respect. They prove you were wrong, not just about me, but also about what makes a family. Richard's gaze flicked to the children, their joy contrasting with his emptiness. Elena continued, her voice steady. "You thought fertility was about bodies, about your perfect lineage. But it's about souls, about nurturing what you claim to want. You planted only deserts, Richard, and called me barren. You demanded performance, not partnership, and now you stand alone in the world you created." The words landed like blows, each one stripping away his defenses. The crowd's silence was deafening, their phones now openly recording. But Elena focused on him. She said, softer now, almost pitying, "I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to close a chapter. Your lie shaped my pain, but it also led me to this life, to Samuel, to my children, to a home where love grows. You didn't break me. You freed me to bloom." Olivia tugged at Elena's hand, her small voice breaking the tension. "Mama, can we get ice cream now? This place is boring." Elena smiled, kneeling to kiss her forehead. "Soon, sweetheart." She stood, meeting Richard's eyes one last time. "You told me I was defective, but the defect was in your heart, not my body. That's something no wealth can fix. I hope you find a way to heal, because I have." She turned, taking Samuel's hand, the children clustering around them as they descended the steps. Their laughter floated back, a melody of joy that pierced Richard's chest. The crowd erupted into murmurs, their judgment palpable. Phones captured his solitude, the once powerful man reduced to a figure of pity. He clutched the divorce papers, their weight insignificant compared to the truth Elena had laid bare. She hadn't just survived his cruelty, she'd transcended it, building a life that radiated what he lacked: love, connection, purpose. Richard stood frozen, the steps stretching endlessly below him. He saw his life clearly now, a series of choices driven by arrogance and fear. He'd married Elena for his mother's approval, discarded her for a lie, then chosen Sophia for her shine, only to be betrayed again. The common thread was his inability to nurture and his obsession with appearances over substance. Elena's words echoed, "Fertility is about souls." He had none to offer, only a mansion full of hollow treasures. The onlookers dispersed, their videos destined for social media, cementing his fall. Richard thought of the nursery, its pastel walls untouched since Elena's departure, a shrine to his mistakes. He'd blamed her, never questioning his capacity, blinded by a legacy his mother protected at the cost of truth. Evelyn's deception, his family's silence, and pride had all conspired to leave him alone on these steps, with nothing but regret. Elena's family disappeared around a corner, their voices fading. Richard imagined them returning to their cottage, a home alive with laughter, where Samuel might carve a new toy or Elena read to the children. That life could have been his if he'd loved her and faced his flaws. Instead, he'd built a cage of wealth and status, locking himself inside. The papers in his hand felt like ash, proof of another failure, another loss. He descended the steps slowly, each one a reminder of what he'd squandered. The town buzzed around him, indifferent to his collapse. Richard knew this moment would define him, not as the heir to an empire, but as the man who'd lost everything that mattered. Elena's forgiveness, strength, and family were mirrors reflecting his emptiness. He had called her barren, but it was his heart that was sterile, incapable of nurturing the love he'd claimed to want. As he reached the street, the weight of that truth settled, a burden he'd carry alone. Knowing the world he'd built was a gilded shell, crumbling under the light of Elena's radiant truth. Years had passed since the courthouse reckoning, and Elena Grant's life had blossomed into a tapestry of joy. The cottage she shared with Samuel had grown, its walls expanded to cradle their family of 6. Aiden, Lucas, Sophia, and Olivia were now spirited toddlers, their laughter filling every corner. The nursery, once a dream, was a chaotic haven of cribs, star-strewn curtains, and toys scattered like confetti. Elena stood in the doorway, watching her children play, their personalities distinct yet woven together. Aiden led with bold ideas, Lucas observed with quiet curiosity, Sophia soothed disputes with gentle words, and Olivia tackled every challenge with fearless glee. This was her miracle, proof that love could nurture life where toxicity had failed. The cottage buzzed with life, its wooden beams carved with care by Samuel's hands. He'd added a playroom with soft edges and a reading nook where Elena read bedtime stories, her voice bringing tales of dragons and heroes to life. The community remained their backbone, neighbors dropping by with fresh pies or babysitting offers. Clara, now a doting aunt, taught the children to plant carrots in the garden, laughing as they smeared dirt on their faces. Once a shadow in the Hayes estate, Elena moved confidently, her stretch marks and tired eyes badges of a life fully lived. She'd started teaching part-time at the local school, sharing her love of stories, her past pain fueling her empathy for others. Samuel's carpentry business thrived, his homes dotting the town, each a testament to his belief in building for memories. He'd crafted a low, sturdy swing set for the backyard, where the children squealed as they soared. Evenings found him and Elena on the porch, sipping tea, watching sunsets paint the sky in hues of hope. Their marriage was a partnership, equal and grounded, navigating the chaos of quadruplets with humor. When Olivia dumped flour on the kitchen floor, declaring it snow, Samuel swept her up, laughing, while Elena salvaged the mess for pancakes. These moments, messy and real, were the heart of their home. Across town, Richard Hayes had begun a slow, painful transformation. The courthouse confrontation with Elena had stripped him bare, exposing the emptiness of his pride. He sold the Hayes estate, its marble halls too heavy with regret, and moved to a modest apartment. Therapy became his lifeline, sessions unraveling the arrogance rooted in his mother's expectations and a childhood devoid of warmth. He learned to name his flaws, to grieve the man he'd been. Seeking redemption, he founded a charity for infertility support, funding treatments and counseling, driven by guilt over Elena's suffering. He spoke at events, sharing his story anonymously, urging couples to test together, to reject blame. It wasn't atonement, but it was purpose. The children grew, their milestones a whirlwind. They crawled, stood, and walked in a flurry, encouraging others. Elena marveled at their bond, how Sophia's giggle calmed Lucas's frown, how Aiden's daring inspired Olivia's adventures. She journaled their antics, like the time they turned Samuel's workshop into a fort, sawdust in their hair. Motherhood was exhausting. Finances were tight despite Samuel's extra projects, but Elena stretched their budget with creativity, sewing clothes and crafting toys from scraps. Their wealth was in love, in the community that celebrated their birthdays with homemade cakes and chaotic games. One spring, a charity gala brought an unexpected reunion. Richard, now a speaker for his foundation, stood at the podium, his voice steady as he shared lessons of humility. Elena and Samuel attended, and their presence provided quiet support for the cause. The children, left with Clara, were likely plotting new mischief. Richard spotted Elena in the crowd, her smile warm, Samuel's hand in hers. After his speech, he approached, heart pounding. "Elena, Samuel, thank you for coming. We're proud of your work," Elena said, her sincerity disarming. "It's helping people. I owe it to you," he admitted. "I was wrong about everything. I'm trying to be better." She nodded, no trace of bitterness. "Keep going, Richard. Healing takes time, but it's possible." Samuel shook his hand, a gesture of peace. "You're doing well. That matters." Richard watched them leave, their ease a reminder of what he'd lost. But for the first time, he felt a flicker of hope, not for reconciliation, but for his own growth. He'd never have Elena's life, but he could build one worth living. Elena tucked the children into bed at the cottage, their small bodies warm against hers as she read a final story. Samuel joined, his deep voice adding silly voices that sparked giggles. As the children drifted off, Elena whispered, "We made this." Samuel replied, kissing her forehead, "The best thing I've ever built." The town continued to embrace them. The local paper ran a feature on the quadruplets, calling them the town's miracle, their photo a beacon of joy. Strangers sent gifts, a testament to the community's heart. Elena reflected on her journey, from the Hayes estate's cold halls to this vibrant home. She'd once believed herself barren, broken by Richard's lies. But love had proven otherwise. Her children were proof of fertility, resilience, and a soul blooming in fertile soil. Watching the children chase fireflies one afternoon, Elena felt peace so complete it brought tears. Samuel wrapped his arms around her. "What's on your mind?" "That every pain was worth it," she said. "It led me here, to them, to you. I'm the luckiest woman alive." "You saved yourself," he said. "I just gave you a place to do it." She leaned into him, their children's laughter ringing. The pain of her past, the storm that nearly claimed her, had forged this life. Richard's cruelty had been a catalyst, pushing her toward a love that nurtured miracles. The cottage, alive with their family's chaos, was no mansion, but it was everything. Elena touched the wooden ring on her finger, and its carved daisies reminded her of growth. She had transcended her past, surviving and thriving, her heart fertile with love. As night fell, the stars mirrored the mural in the nursery, a constellation of hope. Elena knew her story wasn't just hers, it was a lesson for others, that love could heal what cruelty broke. That fertility was of the soul, not just the body. The children slept, their dreams safe in a home built by hands and hearts. And once deemed empty, Elena stood as proof that a garden of eternal blooms could rise from the ashes of a poisoned past.